News today that the Supreme Court is going to have to hear this immunity case. That the appeals court, where it went first, said, nope, he's not immune, which now means it goes to the Supreme Court. Don't forget, this is the, basically, did he orchestrate some kind of, coup effectively? That's what Jack Smith is trying to get at. And one of the things that his lawyers have pointed out is that he's immune because he was the president of the United States. And they actually often go back to, look at what I just happen to have here. How do you like this? Constitution of the United States of America. Because, you never know when you're going to need it. Right? I do. I literally keep it handy at all times. Article 2. And they're saying that somewhere within Article 2 that basically he's got this immunity. And other legal scholars, of which I'm not one, I know a lot about the economy. I can interpret law, but I do not have a JD. But I would say in looking at this, I'm curious. So they're trying to say, well, because of this Article 2 and because of the powers, et cetera, that he's immune and that he should have supreme immunity. And they're going to the court and saying, we want to make sure that he does, in fact, have this, and that every president has this. Because if you don't have that, then could you be in a situation where people get vindictive and they just go after you, just to go after you? It's possible. I mean, that's exactly what happens in Latin America. Every time I turn around, one of the presidents from Brazil is in jail. And then they get out and they become president again. I'm talking about Lula. I mean, his deputy, his VP, Dilma Rousseff, she also went to jail. So, yeah, it happens in a lot of places, including Ukraine, by the way. So we don't want that. Now, do we? So it would probably be a good thing to have some kind of, guaranteed kind of immunity for the president of the United States, at least from these sort of political things. Because if you're going to go after him and say that he started this insurrection on J6, that might be kind of a tough one to prove. I mean, only in that, let's not forget whose footage we saw the entire time, which just happened to be the Speaker of the House's daughter, Nancy Pelosi's daughter, Alexandra Pelosi. Alexandra was a documentary filmmaker, and she showed up instead of any kind of journalist organization, and then she sold her tape or gave it to them, I don't know, but they called it their exclusive, to CNN. CNN ran it over and over and over and over and over again. It was like, come on, after a while, you totally forgot. I bet you didn't even know it was Alexandra Pelosi that shot all that, not CNN. And then they played it in a loop in a kind of mini-series event. I mean, they admitted so much. Regardless of what you think of anything, let's just kind of call it as it is. They wanted to create a storyline. So they went out. They've bragged about this. I showed you this the other day, guys, last week. And they hired the former Disney ABC producer along with, all of them as lawyers. They got together and they said, how can we craft this as a story? He's a good storyteller. Let's turn it into a mini-series so that Americans will tune in every single night. And then they'll believe this. And so then you got to say, wait a second. If this becomes sort of our thought process against their thought process and it's politically loaded, then aren't we going to be in a situation where every U.S. president starts going to jail? Just like what happens in Brazil? I mean, that's my fear, that kind of like, the Patriot Act thing, which had good intentions. And then suddenly, the next thing you know, poor Tucker Carlson wants to get an interview with Vladimir Putin and they're tapping his phones. Or Trish Regan wants to get an interview with Vladimir Putin and they're reading her grocery list. I mean, this is what you have to worry about. So on the one hand, he's asking for total complete immunity. Look, I think, if somebody were to see him engaged in a violent act, you're not immune from that, okay? But in terms of the political style of things, this is an interesting legal question. And I say this as a non-legal scholar. I say this as just an observer and as a journalist. I'll be very interested to see how this one shakes out. The Supreme Court is going to take it, but then it also brings up what if he gets elected, ladies and gentlemen? If he gets elected and he's president of the United States, the polls suggest he will, by the way, we'll see. He's up 5 points compared to Joe Biden in that latest NBC News poll. If he gets elected, he's president of the United States, he goes into the Oval Office, and the next thing you know, he's on trial for an insurrection, and it's going all the way to the Supreme Court. I mean, wow. Right? Well, actually, he wouldn't. They'd rule, first of all, let me just be clear. They'd rule on the immunity clause, and then he'd be back in court with good old Jack Smith. I mean, this could be really messy, and this could be really embarrassing. And I would just say this. It shows you how fragile we are. When I've said in the past that our government's broken, oh boy, I'm not kidding. Like, we're really broken. When we're resorting to this kind of stuff, when we're resorting to the hiring of the ABC Disney guy to come in and weave a tale for the American viewership so that they'll believe one side over the other, you know what? That's not good. It's not good. They want to win this information war, but do they have any shot at doing so? You know, maybe if you just have everybody think just like you. So if we just have the entire media in our back pocket and they all think like us and they all spout our narrative, well, then we have state TV and we'll be okay. Except I'll tell you, and by the way, this comes in fact because I have sources in other places, including in Russia. You know what? A lot of people in Russia, they don't believe whatever the government tells them because they know it's state media. And when they know they can't access all information, they don't trust it. Why should they? So when you consider that Tucker Carlson is over in Moscow right now doing this interview and getting, by the way, praised by, interestingly, the Russian people who I think appreciate maybe that there's another narrative out there. Well, guess what? I find it amazing that so many journalists, whether it be at CNN or whether it be the Weekly Standard guy or whether it be, you know, a congressman coming out saying he's a traitor, everybody's coming down hard on him. Did they ever do that, guys, to the NBC journalist who interviewed? It was like a blip, right? You never even heard about it. This guy from NBC went and interviewed Putin a year and change ago. Let's see. I think we have a date on this story. There we go. Yep. 2021, actually. So a little ways ago. June 2021. Keir Simmons went. But I guess Keir got that, you know, rubber stamp of approval. When Keir was texting back and forth with people in Russia or emailing, somehow people here found out about it and they're like, hey, okay, we'll take him. But they're not going to take Tucker. And think about that. Like, why is it? Do you have to be sanctioned by the U.S. government in order to do these interviews? Did the State Department have to like brief you first? They were totally fine with Barbara Walters interviewing Vladimir Putin. Look at this clip, 2001, ABC's Barbara Walters, now deceased, creator of The View, incidentally, back in the day when it actually talked about real things, sitting down with Vladimir Putin, 2001.
I would say that the United States is losing not in the military, but in the information. It seems to me that on the information field, terrorists are acting more aggressively and more offensively, and they are presenting opposition in terms of emotions. As to the military dimension, in our assessment, things happen the way they should.
You know, I got the idea to look for that from one of you. I'm looking at your comments right now. One of you guys recommended that, and I was like, that is a great point. And you were making the point that she interviewed Castro in Cuba. And I stumbled across this. And wow, I mean, those are interesting words that he said. Back in 2001, we had a much better relationship with Russia. Don't forget, the very first phone call after 9/11 that Bush took was from this guy. It was Vladimir Putin, who wanted to express his condolences. He was the very first world leader. And if you look at that interview, when he warns against how the information war is occurring and happening and that bad people are kind of out in front of that in ways that are not very helpful to the country, he is onto something. Again, I'm not one to restrict speech, but look at what has happened on the left. Look at the extremism that you see over on these platforms like TikTok. I mean, if China wants to get us, that's one good way to do it, right? You destroy the morale and psyche of an entire generation. You pollute their minds with a lot of stuff that really, I'm telling you, is not healthy. Now, as a believer in that freedom of speech, you know what? You want to say this stuff, I guess it's your right to do so. I'm not going to say it's not. But don't tell me that I can't believe and think and say what I believe to be true. And that is where we have a breakdown. They do not want to hear from Tucker, from me, from probably you. And that is fundamentally the issue, which is why I go back to make sure you subscribe. I'm glad we're here. I'm thrilled that we have these pockets of opportunities to talk, to be on a podcast like this, to be streaming like this on YouTube. Thumbs up for that. Live on Rumble, Facebook as well. All of these platforms, Twitter, which are really helpful, instrumental in making sure that we can bring the truth to you today and now.